Welcome to Two Guys, Three Crowns, the podcast that talks about what it's really like to live in Stockholm, Sweden. I'm Sean, and with my fellow American Rodney, we break down the good, the bad, and the just plain weird. It's quite the journey, so join us for the ride.
100 bottles of craft beer on the wall, 100 craft bottles of beer. Take one down, pass it around. 99 craft bottles of beer on the wall. Hey, that's actually pretty tough. That's actually
your rhythm was a little bit
off. Okay, Sean, we have a guest today, and I'm going to actually preface this by saying that the person that we have joining us today is somebody that I actually got a tip from my wife, who had gotten a copy of the Skåne magazine from her mother, because we're keeping up with the Skåne Times down there. And there was an article. There was an article about this gentleman in the Skåne magazine and about his craft brewery down in Malmö. So today we have
Say no more.
So today we actually have Jeffrey Scott Brown with us today.
Woo!
Yeah. So welcome, Jeffrey.
Thank you.
Yeah, it is a pleasure to have us to have you here with us. And I think what we typically do is, before we get into what you're doing here now, is what brought you to Sweden and brought you to Malmö. How did you end up in Malmö?
Well, it's kind of a long story. I was working at the San Francisco airport. I worked there for 17 years. I was injured. I'd split up with my first wife after 10 years. I had this big house. I was all alone. And when I was in college, I trained under a French chef. And I always had a passion for cooking. Wow. I'd always cooked my whole life. And so I made a deal with the insurance company to retrain me. Huh. And so I resigned from my job. And I got accepted into a school in Paris. And I went to a chef school in Paris, and the insurance company paid for the whole thing. And it was what they call a vocational rehabilitation. Right. And I was actually the first voc rehab in the history of the state of California to go outside of the country for education. And so I went to Paris.
The system. Yeah.
I went to Paris. I sold my house. I had about $100,000 in my pocket, and I got an apartment in the left bank. And I lived there for 2 years, and I didn't really work. I just lived off my savings. And during that time, I got a master's in French cuisine and a master's in French pastry. Wow. And then I ended up, by chance, after an internship, working at the Hotel Ritz in the Ritz Club with the head chef, Dominique Fonseca. And it's kind of a crazy story about how I just, by a stroke of luck, I got in there. I tell it more in detail. There's a blog on my website, southplains.se, under the brewer. You can read the story if you like.
Okay.
While I was in school, before I left for Paris, I had lived in Colombia earlier. My first wife was from Barranquilla, and so I knew the importance of speaking Spanish in Colombia, and I also knew in France that I would need to speak French. And so, since I sold my house and I had a lot of money, well, I just hired a tutor, and she came to my house every day, and she taught me French. And I studied with her for 6 months before I left, so that when I got to Paris, I actually spoke pretty good French. And then while I was there the entire time, I continued studying French, and I went to a school there, and by Père Lachaise. And so in the French kitchens, nobody spoke English. And so I had to speak French in the kitchens. Yeah. And so while I was in language school, I started dating a girl from my class, and her name was Sasha, and she was Danish. Okay. And she was going to school in Copenhagen and was doing a minor in French and was working as an au pair in Paris for a year. And so afterwards, after I finished, and I had always planned to stay in France, but me as an American, I would either have to marry a French girl or have specialized skills
Right.
And being specialized in French cuisine is not specialized in France. So, but anyway, so we came back, and I tried. I said, well, we could try it, and we went to Copenhagen, and we fought Danish immigration for like a year.
Wow.
And finally, we gave up. I had a friend of mine that was an attorney, another guy from this school in Paris, and he was a Danish attorney. He'd worked for the Justice Department, and we got married trying to stay in Copenhagen, and they wouldn't even accept that. And then, anyways, we came to Malmö, and she was able to finish her school in Copenhagen, and Sweden gave me a 5-year residence and work permit right off the bat.
Boom.
Oh, wow.
So here I am.
Okay.
That was like 2002.
Right.
Now I've got 4 children, 2 18-year-old boys that are twin, a girl that's 15, and a boy that's 14.
Wow.
Living the dream.
Yeah.
Holy smokes.
And so I worked as a chef. I did catering. I did weddings. I did wedding cakes. I did all kinds of desserts for about 10 years. And then in 2012, I was tired of cooking, and I launched this microbrewery.
Oh.
That's a bit of a leap, though, isn't it? Going from pastry to
It is.
brewery?
Well, it is. I was a longtime home brewer back in the States. And it was a leap. It was a leap on the scale that I was doing.
Right.
Because I was doing 1,200 liter batches where I used to do 20 liter batches.
Wow.
But I'm kind of a jack of all trades where I can build and fix anything. And so we started looking at the costs. And I had a partner that I was working with. I had been doing dinner parties at this farmhouse called Three Lily Buds in Holviken, Vellinge area. And the guy would go down to South Africa in the wintertime. And I had the farmhouse to myself, and I threw parties there. And big dinner parties, like 50, 60 people. I do like 5, 6 courses, very gourmet. And then in the summertime or the wintertime when he was gone, I started brewing batches of beer out in the garage, out in the barn. And man, he thought it was like the best beer he ever had. So he convinced me actually to open a microbrewery.
Okay.
And so we started the company. And first of all, we were going to call it Brown and Paulson. His name is Anders Paulson. Okay. And then we thought about calling it Paulson and Brown. And then I said, what's the name of this area called? And he said, well, it's Soderslätt. And I'm like, well, what's that mean in Swedish? And he's like, well, it'd be South Plains. I'm like, I think that sounds like a great name. That sounds like a great name for a brewery.
Yeah.
So I formed a company and with Bolagsverket, and I registered it. And then when we started looking at the costs, it's like 2, 3, 5 million to start up for brewery equipment. Well, he kind of backed out. And then also he was like divesting from some Swedish interests in Sweden and didn't want to start another business. And so anyways, I thought I wasn't sure I could do it by myself, but I managed to buy used brewing equipment from Bamberg in southern Germany. They've got football fields of old brewing equipment down there. Yeah. And I built this brewery in 2012 for about 200,000 kroner.
Oh,
and that's with a 1,200 liter kettle, a 1,200 liter mash tun, which is oversized for a mash tun. But with that, I can do high gravity beers like 10, 12% beers. A 750 liter hot water tank, and then 3 900 liter fermenting tanks, which were actually transport tanks. And then
so you're bought a real deal production, but on like moonshiner costs.
Yes. And then I bought a new steam generator in Italy to power it all because I'm a little bit afraid of steam generators. I didn't want a used one. I saw lots of used ones on Blocket, and they were like wood fired, and I'm like, I don't want that. Anyways, so I bought a new steam generator. It was about 2,500 euro, and I put it all together and had it up and running, and just got a welder in at the time. I'm doing some welding now, but at the time I had a stainless steel welder do everything. And I was up and running and producing beer. But then, there was a lot to learn because, I had been cooking all my life. Right. When I was 5 years old, I won the apple pie contest at my school, and I've been cooking ever since. And
I love it.
Yeah.
And the thing is, when I cooked, I rarely made mistakes because I had already made all my mistakes.
Right.
I'd made every mistake you could possibly make in cooking, and I
Yeah.
remembered them, and I didn't really make them anymore.
Right.
Sure.
But starting something new like brewing, well, I had a lot of mistakes to learn from.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
And so it took me some time, but I learned a lot of mistakes, and then I learned the way to do it. And I was able to brew a simple batch of beer, but maybe batch number 2 didn't quite taste exactly like batch number 1. And the reason is because you have to get all your parameters exactly right. It has to be the right volumes, the right pH values, the right temperature, the right pressure, all these things. The time limits of everything that you do has to be exactly the same. And only when you do it exactly like that and keep really good records can you get
Consistent
batches consistent batches that are the same. Yeah.
Yeah.
That was a really hard thing.
It's a good thing you used to be a French pastry chef then, right?
Yes. Yeah. Because we weighed everything. I had a little gram scale and I would weigh everything out.
Yeah.
But, before I balanced flavors with food. And now I'm balancing flavors with beer. So in a sense, they're similar.
Okay. Now, when Jeffrey, when did you? The brewery has been around since 2012. Is that?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. And it was since I was on a budget, it was hard to find a location. And I found an old sausage factory in an area called Norra Grängesbergsgatan, which is like where all the Arabic car shops are.
Okay.
Yeah. And it was an old sausage factory, and it was made for food production. So it had trench drains, heavy duty electricity. It had heavy duty ventilation. It was a small place, about 100 meters, but it worked for me. Right. And he made me a deal to get in cheap. And so it was a great location for me. And I was there for 9 years. And then after 9 years, I just kind of outgrew it.
Right.
And then a year ago in July, I moved to this larger location in Norrhamnen, and now I've increased production up to have 24,000 liter capacity now.
Holy smokes!
Wow.
So, yeah, I started out with 2,700 liter. I had 3 900 liter tanks.
Yeah,
but
that's amazing.
Yeah, I had bought 3 2,500 liter tanks a year and a half ago, well, in January 2020, whenever that was, in China. And I got a great price on them. Yeah. And then, so she said, okay, it's going to take like 12 weeks to make them. So they were going to make them. And then it's like 8 weeks on the ocean to get here.
Right.
So, several months. Yeah. So anyways, she said she wanted me to pay half up front and half when they're ready.
Yeah.
And then it was about February 2020, and then Corona hit.
Ooh, okay.
And then the day that I was ready to pay, they shut down the banks in the U.S.
Oh, no.
And all that. And you know what happened to the dollar? It rocketed down.
Yeah.
And so then all of a sudden I looked at the exchange rate, and it hardly cost anything to buy those tanks.
Yeah.
And I looked at it and I said, can this be right? And then I wrote her back in China and I said, you mind if I pay them all right now? And she's like, sure. And I said, the dollar's dropped incredibly.
Yeah.
And she's like, sure, you can pay them. And so I paid the whole thing. And I saved about, I don't know, maybe 20, 30,000 kroner.
Wow.
Just on the exchange rate.
Right.
Wow.
It was substantial.
Yeah.
And it was just a stroke of luck. And it didn't happen again like that. I always watched the dollar. It never dropped like that again from the time that Corona hit. And it was just one of those things.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Hey, Jeffrey, what type of, the selection that you,
okay. I started out doing like American Pale Ale. And the reason was when I came to Sweden, I tasted some American Pale Ales. And, I'd always heard so much about the beers in Europe. And, I traveled in Germany a lot, and I love German beers. And I traveled in Holland, and I traveled in Belgium, and I loved the lambics. And I traveled in England. I like all the ales and all that. And when I got here, they had, some of the regular beers, they were okay, like Spendrups or Prips or Carlsberg. And I always liked Carlsberg and Tuborg a lot. But then when I tasted like Swedish American Pale Ale, well, it didn't really taste like American Pale Ale. It tasted more like an English Pale Ale.
Okay.
And when I tasted India Pale Ale, it didn't really taste like an American Pale Ale. It tastes like an English IPA. And so I was kind of disappointed. And so I kind of wanted to do something. And that was one thing that was kind of bothering me, that I felt like I really need to show them how it's really supposed to taste.
Right.
And, if you go to California and drink it there, it's wonderful on tap. But if you take the beer in California and you ship it through the Panama Canal, and it takes 6 weeks to get here, and it's got hot, cold, well, it's not all that good by the time it gets here. It's still pretty good, but it's nothing like what it was.
Right.
And so even the beer in Systembolaget, it wasn't all that great. And so when I started in 2012, my concept was to do fresh American-style beer like you would get in California.
Right.
And a lot of people loved it, but a lot of people, it was way too weird for them.
Right.
Yeah. And they were like, I've never tasted anything like this. Is this thing right? Is this infected? What's wrong with this? I'm like, it costs, I spend so much money on hops to get that flavor like that.
Yeah.
And
yeah.
And so it took a long time. But now in 2012, when I did my American Pale Ale, it was considered extreme. And now it's not.
Right.
And now every Swedish microbrewery is doing a classic New England IPA or a classic American IPA, and they're true to style.
Yeah. Yeah. Now, when you started, or when you were getting rolling, how many, say, craft breweries were down in your area? Were down in Malmö?
Well, actually, these guys came to me in 2013, and they wrote a book, and the book is called Svensk Rebel Brewer or something. I can't remember the name of it now. It's like the Swedish Rebel Brewers.
Okay.
And they wrote it on 7 microbreweries in 2013 that were changing the beer culture of Sweden.
Yeah.
And one chapter was on me.
There you go.
They brought down photographers down to Norrtäljevägsgatan, and they thought it was a bad area. They were kind of nervous to be in there. And then on the headline of my brewery area, it said "Brewer in the Hood." Yeah.
Oh.
But there was maybe 3 or 4 down here in Skåne, 5, and then and now there's hundreds.
Yeah. Yeah, because I remember that you had mentioned 7, and then like now that it was hundreds.
Yes.
Yeah.
But there was Ocean in Gothenburg, and there was quite a few around. Breckeriet was around. Lundabryggeriet was around. Brygghuset Finn had just started up. A Malmö Brewing Company, but they just served beer on taps there.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
And now, so you're kind of one of the OG godfathers of craft brewing around in the scene.
Yeah, but
right? You've been at it a little while.
Yeah, sure. But I'm pretty low key, and I don't make much of it. I just kind of keep quiet and keep to myself and do my own thing. I'm not out there, banging my drums or anything like that.
Oh yeah, for sure. But even after all these years, like, is there something that's still like the bane of your existence? Like, what's the thing that you're always like in a new batch, like, oh, here we go? Is it like a pH, balancing the pH levels? It's always like that.
Yeah, it's well, as a chef, I've just got a million ideas, and so I'm just full of creativity, and I design my own labels, and I've just got a million ideas. But the thing is, I'm kind of limited on how much I can do. Like right now, I've got 5 clean beers. And when I say clean beer, I mean like I've got an American Pale Ale, 6%. I've got a 6.7% IPA. I've got a 7.1% black IPA. I've got a 10% stout and a 7.5% Saison. Those are my 5 clean beers. And then I've got 6 sour beers, and they're under another label called Funkyland. And my Funkyland beers are like an American sour beer, which is kind of a modern version of the classic Belgian lambic. And so in Belgium, they've been doing it. The monks have been doing it for centuries, where they would do a spontaneous fermentation in a cool ship, and then put Brettanomyces on, and then put it in barrels and age it for a year, and then you've got lambic. And they would put on fruit like peaches or cherries. But I'm doing it more like the fruits I use is like passion fruit and mango and elderberry. And I've got sea buckthorn, which is havtorn in Swedish. And I've got all kinds of stuff. And so it's a little bit more progressive, you could say.
Now, when you want to experiment or when you want to do things, I'm just wondering, can you do things on a smaller scale, or do you do things on a smaller scale when you're testing?
No, I haven't done that since I started.
Okay.
When I first started, before I did it, I brewed like 5 batches of the American Pale Ale. And that was before I started. That was like in 2011 test batches. But since then, I know it so well, I just go for it.
Right. Yeah. Now, what was the name of the other one? Sean, you knew what it was. Kombucha. Kombucha.
Yeah. Right. Then I've got 5 types of kombucha, and I've got 1 tank that's dedicated to kombucha. It's a 2,500 liter tank. Wow. And I mean, I got a piece of Scooby that's about 1.5 meters wide, and I don't know, very thick. Yeah. And I just fill it up and give it a month, then empty it, and fill it up and give it a month. And actually, I put about 60 liters down of kombucha and put it down for a year. And, over time, it gets super sour. Yeah. And it gets so sour, it's like vinegar after a year when you age kombucha. Wow. And so now I'm releasing kombucha vinegar. Okay. And I've got a new label. I've got a new label for it. And, with a little olive oil and kombucha vinegar on a salad is wonderful.
Bam.
Wow. I'm seeing the too many ideas things coming out right now.
Yeah. And so this will be a product that we're just going to sell at our boutique at the brewery for now. I don't know if I'll have that in grocery stores. But I ordered some labels, and when I ordered bottles from Poland, I just ordered some small 200 milliliter oil bottles, and with like plastic caps that twist on and lock in place. And so, I'm ready to bottle my kombucha vinegar. Yeah. I've also got red wine vinegar going. The red wine vinegar comes from a mother, it's like a thick sediment that's in the bottom of the barrel. And that's what gives the vinegar its flavor. And you put wine in, and it will ferment that into acetic acid, and it turns it into vinegar. And so, of course, you have to use wine that has no chemicals or additives. If you had sulfites, it won't work. Right. When I lived in San Francisco, my neighbors were Italian, and they had come over in like the 50s. And all Italian families that immigrated to San Francisco brought their vinegar barrel. And when they got there, they filled it with red wine. And so I was able to get some mother from this family's vinegar barrel, and I've had it growing since like 1990s. Wow. And it makes really good vinegar, really nice, strong vinegar.
Yeah.
Legit, straight from the source. That's amazing.
Yeah. Yes. Yeah. And so, anyways, back on the kombucha. So I've got, I've got passion fruit hibiscus. I've got mango lime. I've got natural. I'm kind of blanking out now. I've got blackberry ginger. And then I've got one apricot mint. And that one has sold the least. And so actually I'm taking that out right now. I love apricot, but apricot didn't sell that well here. And so I'm replacing it with what I love is the sea buckthorn, which is the havtorn. I'm replacing that on a kombucha. And then also I've got a new berry called chokeberries. And they're called, in Swedish, it's aronia bar or something like that.
Yeah, dark.
And, they're like a super fruit, like
super healthy.
Yeah, it's like that Brazilian little blue fruit.
Acai.
Yes, it's like that. And so it's really, really good for you. And it kind of tastes like kind of a blackberry, blueberry, sour grapes flavor. Yeah.
It's kind of funny about the with the apricots. I'm thinking for a country that likes to put bananas on pizza, you know.
Yeah, but bananas on pizza, that's everywhere.
Yeah. Yes.
Yeah, yeah. When my wife was pregnant with the twins, she couldn't eat for like 6 weeks, and she never eat. Finally, we were ready to take her to the hospital because she couldn't eat. Everything she would eat, she'd throw up. And then I came home from work one day, and she said, "I ate." I'm like, "What did you eat?" And she's like, "Banana Hawaiian pizza." And pregnant, they have these weird cravings.
Yeah.
That must have been how they invented the banana curry chicken pizza in the first place.
Yeah.
Hey, Jeffrey, do you have, because we're heading into winter, Christmas is right around the corner. Do you have like Christmas?
I do.
Yeah.
I have 2 Christmas beers coming out.
Okay.
Matter of fact, we're shipping them out. We shipped some out last week. We're shipping others out this next week. I have a winter ale, which is a dark, old-fashioned style ale, and it's lightly spiced with orange peel, vanilla, ginger, and cinnamon.
Okay.
Very light.
Yeah.
So you just, like when you take a drink, you just get a hint of it. Yeah. It's very subtle and just a hint. It's not strong at all. Then I also have a Funky Land Christmas beer, and it's called Red Christmas. It's called Red Christmas, and right on top it says in very small letters, "I'm dreaming of a Red Christmas."
Nice.
And it's a sour red beer. It's got elderberries, red currants, strawberries. What else? Rhubarb and hibiscus. And it's very sour, and it's a bright red color.
Okay.
Yeah, I can imagine that'd be red.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You had also mentioned, or I saw when I was on the website, about Hoppapalooza.
Hoppapalooza, sure.
Yeah, and that's your...
And so I'm the organizer and the promoter of Hoppapalooza. And it started in 2014 just to promote the local craft beer industry. And I talked with some other breweries, and we kind of all agreed that something needed to be done. And I'd kind of hoped that somebody else would do it, or that we could do it together. But everyone was kind of afraid. They thought, we could lose money. And so I said I'd do it. And there was seven microbreweries we got together. And they said that if I did it, and if we lost money, everyone would split the cost with me. So nice. I agreed to do it. Yeah. So I got a band lined up. The band was called Efter Som Fisk. And they played like psychedelic trance lounge music. And I had a friend of mine that was a chef, and he came and worked with me. Matan Levy is his name. And we did some vegetarian food, and we grilled some sausages, and I don't know what we did, some chicken or something. And we made a plate, like a plate of the day for everybody. Okay. And we sold them pretty cheap. And we had about maybe 300 people come. Right. And we charged people 250 crowns to get in the door. And with that, they got a beer glass. Yeah, beer glass that says Hoppapalooza, and a T-shirt. And then once inside, all beers were 20 kroners. And we had, like I said, 7 microbreweries, and they all had about 5 or 6. So we had about 40 beers to taste. And people loved it. And then we did it again the next year. And, it's in the end of July. And it was really nice, but it looked like it was going to rain that day. But I had tents.
Okay.
And sure enough, about an hour after it started, it just poured down. And it's an outside festival. It's an outside festival in our parking lot, in like this rundown industrial area. And everybody just crowded under the tents. And you know what it is in Sweden? It comes through, it rains hard for 10 minutes, and then the sun comes out and it's gone.
Yeah.
And that's the way it is. And, any time of the year, it can rain like that in Sweden.
Right.
And so that's why it's kind of tricky to do an outdoor festival here.
Right.
But then after the sun came out, like a lot of people, they were kind of watching the weather, and as soon as the sun broke, they went to Hoppapalooza. Well, the next day in Sydsvenskan, they had a picture of a line going around the corner and up 6 blocks.
Wow.
The line to get in.
Yeah.
Word
because they all
is
came
out.
at once.
Yeah.
It was like 1,000 people came at once. And we got him in. We got him in eventually.
Yeah.
Anyways, then it's gone on more and more. And then 3 years ago or 4 years ago, I got in touch with the city of Malmö, and they liked what I was doing so much. But they thought if I could move it to another location, like a big park, and they would get me a park. So they got me Bayers Park in Kjærsberg. It's a really nice park. And it has a stage. And so I was able to set up a sound system with a stage. I had like 10 bands lined up. I had several hard rock bands, but I also had country western, Motown, blues, jazz. I had all kinds of stuff. And so then I had like 8 food trucks. And it's local food trucks, but I've even got one, Jeffrey's Burgers comes from Stockholm.
Okay.
And so, I mean, it's local, it's Sweden. And then I had 25 local breweries. I had about 150 beers on tap, local beers, which are beers you've never heard of. We had about 8,000 people and poured about 30,000 beers.
Wow.
It's a big deal.
Yeah.
We had about 1 million crowns in revenue. Now, most of that goes to the breweries, and there's a lot of expenses and stuff. But but the main thing is to promote the local craft beer industry,
Right?
Because you go to the big beer festivals, and it's all about Spendrups and Carlsberg. And it's their money, so why not? They're paying for it.
Sure.
Yeah.
So at this festival, there was no mass-produced beers and no beers with a massive carbon footprint.
Right.
Only locally produced.
Nice.
Yeah.
Now, I had one year. I had Arvid came from Uppsala, from Temple Brewing, and that's pretty far, Uppsala. And then and I had some come from Copenhagen, which is much closer than Uppsala. And so it kind of depends, but I go on a local level. But I had like some Copenhagen guys, they wanted to bring a cider. And I said, well, where's it made? And they're like, well, it's made in England. And I'm like, sorry, man, you can't come. It's only local. If it was made in Denmark, you could bring it. But if it's made in England, you can't bring it. And, I mentioned this when we talked the other day, but if you go into any bar in Sweden, you'll find beers from all over the world. But you won't find many local beers. And the reason is because the bars get under a contract with the distributor, and they build a 100,000 crown tap system, and then they got to buy the beers from them.
Right.
And so if you go into a bar, they'll have a red lager from Australia, or they'll have an IPA from New England. And they're great. They're great beers. But it's a massive carbon footprint to get a red lager from Australia.
Sure.
And you don't need to destroy the planet to drink a beer. But people don't think about it. And so at Hoppapalooza, we bring this awareness to them, and we say, look, there's a great red lager in Tomelilla, and there's a great IPA in Trelleborg.
Right.
And they're right here. If you just knew where to get them, and with Systembolaget, if you order in your local boutique, if you know the name of the brewery, what you want, they'll ship it right to you, and you can pick it up in your local store.
Yeah.
And we bring awareness to the local industry, and people will order local craft beers. And, it's like I go to Willie's or someplace and buy garlic, and I would never buy garlic from China. There's a lot of garlic there from China, but China's on the other side of the planet.
Right.
Now, you can get great garlic from Spain, and that's not that far. And so I would always choose the Spanish garlic.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. And that's just an example.
Yeah. Jeffrey, now when you said that Hoppapalooza is typically in July.
The last Saturday of July.
And it didn't happen this past...
last 2 years. Last 2 years we haven't done it with the pandemic.
Okay. But possibly the upcoming summer.
Yeah. I'm very excited to do it this year. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. And as far as your selection for those that are here in Sweden, I know that you can go into Systembolaget. I've seen your beer on there, but they can actually go ahead and order to their local.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Absolutely. If you just if you go on Systembolaget and say you did a search for South Plains or for Funkyland, my clean beers or my sour beers would come up. And then you can order them and have them sent right to your local boutique. And also, I mean, my beers, they're not expensive. I sell my American Pale Ale for $19.90 on the shelf.
Yeah.
And, when I first started, I had it for 25 or 35 crowns I had beers for. Yeah. And people would buy one to taste it.
Right.
But now, at $19.90, they buy 10 or 12 and take it home for the weekend.
There you go.
And because, so I make less per bottle, but I make more on volume.
Right.
Yeah, for sure. There you go.
Yeah.
You just got to have like those branded little tiny cardboard box trays so people can
walk
up
right.
Yes.
Clink, 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 clink.
Yeah. And I have one quick question. We typically ask guests that we've had like their favorite this or their favorite that. And what I'm wondering is if you were to choose like your favorite Swedish food. Now you have a little bit of food background. What would a favorite Swedish food be?
You mean like classic?
Well, I'm just thinking like a Swedish dish, like maybe a surströmming shake. No. But I'm thinking like
any course,
I love fresh
course.
salmon. So I mean, we have fresh salmon 2 or 3 times a month at home.
Right.
And so I mean, I just love fresh fish. And that was one thing that kind of bothered me when I first came here is that everybody just ate frozen fish.
Right.
And it was hard to find fresh fish. And I mean, why? You're surrounded by oceans.
Yeah.
And then I finally found where to get fresh fish. It took me a long time. And, but I like to cook fresh fish. And so that's something I love that I can get local fresh fish.
Right.
In California, here they have the North Atlantic salmon. That's the one variety of salmon that they have in these waters. And they go up to Norway. It's the same. Mm-hmm. But in California, we have like 6 or 8 varieties of salmon that are running up and down between Alaska and the California coast. And we have like Chinook and sockeye and all these different kinds. And some are big and some are little.
Right.
And and so I had, but in salmon in California is very, very expensive.
Yeah.
And so when I got here, I thought that salmon was pretty reasonable.
Right. Now, what about gravlax?
Oh yeah, I make that.
Okay, but that's
if I buy a whole fish and I've got 2 big fillets, I usually preserve one. Okay. And you just put sugar on it, you seal the pores, and then you put salt on it, and you can put some dill on it or whatever, and wrap it up in a cloth, right. And you put it in the fridge and you press it down and you leave it for 3 or 4 days or a week or whatever. You come back and you've got it.
Yeah.
And it'll last for a long, long time.
Yes. Now, what about if you're down in Malmö? Do you have a favorite tourist spot or maybe a spot there if somebody comes and visits?
Like when someone comes to town.
Yeah.
Well, yeah. I mean, if someone comes to town like a tourist or something, I would send them downtown to like Lilletorg and walk around in the King's Park and on the walking street. That's what I would send somebody. Or if they want to go see something, I would often send them over to Denmark and see Copenhagen.
Okay.
Or welcome
to Sweden. Leave the country.
We're so close to Copenhagen. It's a fabulous city.
Yeah.
And send them to like Louisiana, the Museum of Modern Art, just north of Copenhagen. And then there's also the castle in Helsingør,
right?
Kroneborg Slot.
Yeah,
that's where Hamlet took place at. Or Shakespeare wrote about it.
Yeah,
or something rotten in Denmark.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Jeffrey, thank you so much for joining us, for enlightening us and bringing us up to speed.
My pleasure.
Yeah, and we're going to go ahead and put up some links so that people can go in and check out the brewery, as well as check out some more information, read a little bit more about your story.
Yeah, okay. And do you want to do something like another film, like an introduction to the brewery, or I could film something if you like?
You know what? We'll probably go ahead and do that in like a part 2.
Okay, sounds good.
Yeah, but we
Yes.
just wanted to say thank you so much, Jeffrey, and we will remain in touch. We'll put up the links with the episode. People can check out more information, and then maybe
Okay.
Sean and I will have to take a trip down to your neck of the woods and pay you a visit.
Yes. Yeah, or maybe we
Yes.
come down to the festival if nothing else.
Ah,
Yes,
yeah.
give
That
me
road
give me
trip
the
is
links,
happening.
or just come visit the brewery. You'd love to do that.
That sounds great.
Give me the links, and I'll do some Instagram posts or something, and we'll share it all on social media.
Great. Thanks a million, Jeffrey.
All right, everyone, that will do it for this week's episode. A very special thank you to Jeffrey Scott Brown from South Plains Brewing Company for stopping by. Great to learn about the independent beer making and brewing and cider scene down there in the south of Sweden. We will put links to all of his relevant profiles in the description. Make sure you stop by Systembolaget to check out his latest creations, and then come back here next time for more Two Guys, Three Crowns.